Welcome to the Gavel, everyone. I'm Terry Ikumi. Well, let's take a look at what members of the National Assembly were up to this past week. It was indeed a week of approvals in both chambers of the National Assembly. Within 3 hours, the National Assembly approved a request by the President to borrow $6.9 billion, increase the 2026 budget proposal, and extend the capital components of the 2025 budget from March 31st, 2026 to the 30th of June, 2026. Well, let me break it down for you. After a 2-week break, federal lawmakers resumed plenary in both chambers. In the Senate, the lawmakers picked up the day's proceedings with a request by President Bola Tinubu seeking an increase to the 2026 budget appropriation bill.
Transmission of proposed adjustments to the 2026 appropriation bill and the associated financing plan. Now, the proposed adjustments are intended to achieve 3 related objectives, namely, seek to regularize identified outstanding legacy capital commitments carried forward from prior appropriation cycles, to ensure that the 2026 fiscal program is not unduly burdened by unresolved obligations from previous years, provide for a limited number of strategic additions in transport, health, and institutional preparedness considered necessary in line with continuity of governance and national development. Consequently, the Senate is kindly invited to consider the regularization of outstanding unfunded 5.7 trillion capital obligations arising from the 2025 Appropriation, Repeal and Enactment Act within the 2026 Appropriation Bill and 2 trillion capital supplementation for priority capital projects distributed across multiple sectors and locations nationwide, which were omitted in the rollover into the 2026 Appropriation Bill. This has become expedient as the outstanding obligations are unlikely to be implemented before the expiration of the 2025 capital budget implementation window. In addition, provision is proposed for several strategic interventions of national importance.
The committee further observed that the adjustment to the 2026 budget estimate will enable the full implementation of outstanding obligation under the 2025 capital budget during the 2026 fiscal year. Fundamentally, many critical sectors of the economy are given priority in the additional 9 trillion adjustment. That the capital expenditure component in the 2026 budget estimate is comparatively higher than the previous Appropriation Act, reflecting the federal government determination to prioritize important sectors such as security, health, education, infrastructural development, and welfare of the electorate.
As the chief has said, we people in the Northeast have been crying that we seem to be neglected in terms of developmental projects in this country. But I think this time around, with the inclusion of some key projects, particularly the railway and the highway projects, I think this time around we have to thank Mr. President. We thank him very much, and we hope, as Senator Nigi said, it's not enough just to propose. The important thing is to implement. If you propose, you don't implement, it is as if you have not done anything. So we hope, with all the support we give Mr. President for all his requests, loans and other things, we hope these laudable projects proposed in 2026 will be fully implemented.
Mr. President, distinguished senators, I'm throwing my full weight behind the passage of this request or bill against the background of the fact that there is a specific request to dedicate 40% of the loan for the implementation of the capital component of the budget. And as we all know, It is the capital component of the budget that touches on the implementation of what is contained in the Renew Hope agenda and is something that brings dividends of democracy to the doorsteps of our people.
The House of Representatives also received the same request from the President.
The proposed adjustments are intended to achieve three related objectives, namely, seek to regularize identified outstanding legacy capital commitments carried forward from prior appropriation cycles to ensure that the 2026 fiscal program is not unduly burdened by unresolved obligations from previous years. Provide for a limited number of strategic additions in transport, health, and institutional preparedness considered necessary in line with continuity of governance and national development. The identifiable gross adjustment to the 2026 appropriation bill is approximately 9.08 trillion, comprising 7.71 trillion legacy capital regularization and 1.37 trillion in additional strategic provisions. To support these adjustments, the accompanying financing plans proposes an equivalent consequential financing adjustments, which include external financing instruments. This approach is considered more prudent in the present circumstances, given the need to moderate pressures on domestic interest rates, preserve private sector access to credit, and align funding sources more appropriately with capital-intensive, import-dependent expenditure items. The House of Representatives may also note that these proposals are consistent with the administration's commitment to restore budget discipline by ensuring that current year fiscal resources are applied.
Both chambers approved the President's request.
15 trillion 427 billion 257 million 802,407 naira only is for recurrent non-debt expenditure, while the sum of 32 trillion 287 billion 61 million 472,797 naira only is for contribution to the Development Fund for capital expenditure for the year ending on the 31st day of December 2026, bill read for the third time and passed.
The approval of the President's request was further explained by the Chairman of the House of Representatives Committee on Appropriations as the House proceeded to consider and pass the 2026 Appropriations Bill.
Fundamentally, the 2026 Appropriation Bill seeks to consolidate macroeconomic stability, improve the business and investment environment, promote job-rich growth, and reduce the poverty rate with a view to strengthen human capital while protecting vulnerable stakeholders. Legislative actions. Mr. Speaker, honorable colleagues, the House debated on the general principle of the bill on Thursday, 29 January 2026. As the conclusion of the debate, the bill was read a second time and subsequently referred to the Committee on Appropriation for the further legislative action. The proposed adjustments were intended to regularize outstanding legacy capital commitments carried over from previous appropriation cycles, thereby ensuring that the 2026 fiscal program is not unduly burdened by unresolved obligation from earlier years. The proposal also sought to accommodate a limited number of strategic interventions in the areas of transport, health, and institutional preparedness considered critical to national development and governance continuity.
The new 68.3 trillion naira 2026 budget, which comprises 4.7 trillion naira for statutory allocations, 15.8 trillion naira for debt servicing, 15.4 trillion naira for recurrent expenditure, and 32.2 trillion naira for capital expenditure was subsequently passed by both chambers. Now, some notable capital allocations include the Ministry of Defense, 466.3 billion naira, Federal Ministry of Education, 655.8 billion naira, Federal Ministry of Agriculture and Food Security, 3.3 trillion naira, Federal Ministry of Innovation, Science and Technology, 1.8 trillion naira, Federal Ministry of Works, 3.2 trillion naira, provision for 2024 outstanding contractors' liabilities, 1.3 trillion naira, payment of local contractors, debts and other liabilities, 100 billion naira, and the Federal Ministry of Health and Social Welfare, 1.2 trillion naira. Well, back in the Red Chamber, the Senate President announced a fresh request by the President for a $6.9 billion external loan.
This loan, when drawn down, will assist us to secure the Tinkan Port and the Apapa Port, rehabilitate, restructure, and reconstruct to make Nigeria a better destination for shippers, so that most goods will stop going to other ports, including Cotonou, so thereby creating a lot of jobs for Nigerians and also enhancing the Nigerian economy.
The loan was quickly approved by the Senate. The same speedy approval was given by the Green Chamber when the letter was read by the Speaker. Now, since 2025, the National Assembly has made about 5 additional foreign loan approvals, including the July 2025 additional $347 million request for the 2025 to 2026 borrowing plan due to cost overruns on the Lagos-Calabar Coastal Highway. In October 2025, $2.3 billion to part finance the 2025 budget's deficit and refinance Eurobonds. In March 2026, $6.9 billion, including $5 billion from Abu Dhabi Bank, as well as a 1.15 trillion naira domestic loan to bridge the 2025 budget funding gap after appropriation adjustments. Meanwhile, both chambers approved an amendment to the 2025 Appropriation Act, extending the capital component of the Act from March the 31st to June the 30th, 2026. The approval, according to the Senate President, is to give the executive the latitude to ensure adequate implementation of the 2026 budget. Welcome back to Gavel. Let's take a look at events outside the chambers now. The port concession regime introduced in 2006 is now getting the attention of the House of Representatives almost 20 years later. Last year, the House set up an ad hoc committee to carry out an investigation and appraise the performance and benefits accruing to the federal government from all concessionaire-operated ports, both air and sea terminals.
Based on the document you submitted to us, these are our findings. If you have anything in contrary, like I said to your secretary, we will not take you as a association. We have your agreement. Because the one you submitted to us, we also got agreement from Ministry of Justice. Because the agreement we got from the Ministry of Justice are different from some of the agreements submitted to us by the terminals operator. But what we are saying is the fees that is meant to the Federation, that are not paid to Federation, that is the only area we have ground.
Now, you said no evidence of payment of commencement fee. It's not in the agreement, sir. You see no evidence of payment lessor asset purchase. It's not in the agreement, sir. You see no evidence of remittance on annual lease fees. It's not in the agreement, sir.
Meanwhile, the clamor for more states in the southeast continues as it gains the support of the Deputy Speaker. The Right Honorable Benjamin Kalu made his support clear when he received stakeholders of the Anioma State Movement in his office, led by Senator Ned Nwoko. The Deputy Speaker, however, proposed a fusion of the 2 states currently being put forward.
We are here as the people of Anioma. Anioma people are Ndibo. As far as we are concerned, Igbo Bofu, and they have come to express their support towards the creation of Anioma State.
For this to work, you need to partner
with part of Imo State, with part of Anambra State, for this to work. And that is the truth. You cannot be in Delta at the moment and say you want to create a state out of Delta and call it Southeast. But if you join with part of Southeast, you become a Southeastern extension, which is Southeastern Zone. The argument from the South will be that if you're from Delta and you created among yourself, it is just an expansion of an extra state for the South-South, not the Southeast. So that we know how we project our narratives. And this is not a project that will be anchored only by South-South or anchored only by Southeast. Remember, what we want to increase is extra state in the Southeast.
As chairman of the Constitution Review Committee, the Deputy Speaker promises that the committee and indeed the National Assembly would prioritize the creation of an additional state for the people of the Southeast. Now, this week on Constituency Focus, we'll speak to Representative Clement Jimbo, representing Abaketim-Ekpo Ika Federal Constituency of Akwa Ibom State in the House of Representatives.
First, we've empowered our people in terms of training on different skill sets. Is it ICT? Is it on soil plastering? And the rest of them. Over 400 of our constituents have benefited from that. Then we move into capital projects, road grading, solar street light, building of schools. So far, we have installed solar street light across the different communities in my federal constituency, not less than 200 stands of solar street light. Remember when subsidy was removed and the prices of petroleum products skyrocketed, and we thought it wise to make sure these communities are provided for with solar-powered borehole where they don't need to use generator or use fuel to power the boreholes. So these projects are currently on, and people are benefiting from it. We've equally started and completed town hall meetings in these communities. We've equally assisted our people to register for JAM, registered at least 300 of our people in JAM, and they've sat for the exam. Many of them have gained admission, and they are currently undergoing their studies. We have equally graded nothing less than 30 kilometers of roads, rural roads, which were completely impassable before then. And so far, these roads are accessible for people, rural dwellers, to access this road easily to make life bearable for them. We've equally done a lot of empowerment in terms of reaching out to our constituents that really supported us. We've empowered them with cars, we've empowered them with sewing machines, we've empowered them with grinding machine, we've empowered them with motorcycles, we've empowered them with agricultural equipment and tools, and we've equally followed it up with all kinds of cash empowerment. For example, the last one we did was to select market women and empower them with a minimum of 50,000 naira, about 93 of them. We've equally given scholarship to some of our constituents. We've equally empowered them with bursary, the students that are in tertiary institutions. And we've given a laptop to many of them that our abilities is capable of doing. So we have done a whole lot of empowerment in this regard. Then if you want to talk about the bills that we have sponsored and the motions that we have moved in this direction, which is equally gaining traction in terms of empowerment of our people. I recall when I was inaugurated, I brought a situation in my community, which is called Obiobom, a dilapidated bridge that has been there since 2001. And I brought it to the attention of the federal government in the parliament, and federal government has intervened. Right now, that bridge has been constructed for our people to benefit. We've equally sponsored a bill for the establishment of a Federal College of Laboratory Scientists in my community, in Abak to be precise. And that bill, by the grace of God, has scaled through first reading, second reading, public hearing, third reading, and it has been passed in the House, just waiting for the President to assent for that to be swung into action. And of course, the many motions and petitions we have equally laid in the House that have equally brought succor to so many of our constituents, not just my constituents, but Nigerians at large, because we've intervened for them to be reinstated in their workplace. We've equally intervened for them to be paid their arrears and emolument backlog and the rest of them. So, by the grace of God, within the 1 year and about 6-7 months, we have occupied this office. Our people have really benefited immensely and from the robust engagement of our legislative engagement.
And that's all the time we have on the Gavel this week. Do well to send feedback to the Gavel at channelstv.com. The National Assembly has now adjourned till the 21st of April, 2026. I'm Terry Ikumi. Goodbye.